All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Pete Caliendo, your host, Baseball Outside the Box. This is a show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love to challenge the status quo. And we've got some great guests, and we love our guests because they do a great job, bring us a lot of great information. And thank you, everybody. ESPN Honolulu, aloha. Thanks for hosting the show. And thank you, everybody in the US and around the world for listening. We're over 100 countries, and we appreciate everything you do for us. Anytime you need anything, you have somebody that you like us to interview, let us know. And just email me at caliendo19@gmail.com. And we are live on Facebook. So if you have any questions on Facebook, please put them in the comments section. And don't forget, special thank you to SIS, our Japanese friends, the new sponsor, IT company, Solutions Integrated Services. If you're a business and you need a bunch of this stuff like installation on telephones, digital network systems, sales network equipment relocations, cabling, electrical work, client support and management, these guys are fantastic. Great baseball people too. The owner's a baseball coach, great friend of mine. They do a fantastic job. They've got some big clients in the US. So do me a favor, if you're interested in any of their work, just email me, caliendo19@gmail.com. We'll put you directly with the owner. All right, man, let's get started. We got a great show. We continue to bring you some great guests. And let me tell you, talk about a baseball career. It is going to be a lot of fun. A good friend on the show today, Tony Garofalo. Can you believe this? First of all, it's his 50th anniversary. So we're going to welcome Tony in a minute here. But 43 years, and he may correct me on this, but 43 years athletic trainer. Hey, major league trainer with the Chicago Cubs from 1977, 1986. You know, I'm in Chicago, so obviously I follow the Cubs a lot. He's the founding partner of Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society, PBATS. We're going to talk to him about that. And I got to, I met him the first time when I was with the Schaumburg Flyers, and ever since, boy, it's been a lot of fun. Learned a lot from him, and he saved me. I had double hip replacement. He recommended a doctor. Well, we may even talk about that. Let's welcome our good friend, Tony Garofalo. What's up, Tony?
Hey, Pete, how you doing?
Doing good, man. I'm sure I missed something there. If I went over your career in as an athletic trainer, we'd be here till midnight.
Well, it's been a long career. I first started doing this stuff professionally when I was 20 years old, and
Wow.
and I was still a student in college at the time when I first did my first professional gig, and 52 years I've been doing this. It's a long time.
Wow, 52 years. And here's we're gonna have some fun here because I want to get into that because I also want, I want young people that are getting in the industry to understand that, how to get in the industry, what they should be doing, maybe, what you went through, and we'll talk about that. I think that's important. Then we'll get into some of the fun stuff too with baseball. But let's do this for our audience real quick. Okay. You mentioned where'd you grow up?
I grew up in St. Louis. I was a
St. Louis.
diehard Cardinal fan when I grew up.
Oh boy, and then you had to go to the Cubs. That'd be interesting.
Well, it was fun. I mean, what was good about it is when the transition from the Cardinals to the Cubs, a lot of guys who I was with in the minor leagues for the Cardinals, we all came up to the big leagues at the same time. At the time, the Cardinals had a fabulous minor league system, and there was probably, of the guys I had in the minor leagues, I'd say probably 50 to 60 of those guys made it to the big leagues someplace, somewhere or another. So it was like kind of like old home, especially when I go to St. Louis. A lot of those guys who I was with in the minor leagues were coming up into the big leagues at the time. So it was fun.
Yeah, talk about a rivalry. Wow. Well, it's gonna be fun talking about that too. How about what did you want to be when you were a young kid?
I always loved sports, and I was a soccer player growing up in St. Louis. And centuries ago, when I started high school, it was our high school in St. Louis, believe it or not, didn't have a soccer team, which is unusual because St. Louis was considered the hotbed of soccer in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the 1950 World Cup team that featured half of the team came from the Hill in St. Louis, which you might know is an entire Italian section in St. Louis. And a lot of those guys played on that 1950 team that beat England. The first time England was upset in the World Cup was because of this team partially from St. Louis and partly from the East Coast. So soccer was big in St. Louis, but my my high school didn't have a soccer team. So, all my friends were playing different sports, and I'm not a football guy. I'm not a basketball guy. I played some baseball, but my coach, my athletic director said, well, why don't you try this student athletic trainer course that's given? So he paid for me to do a student athletic trainer course, and I learned how to tape ankles and, just the basics, first aid. And I got hooked on it. And then when I graduated from high school, I was going to play college soccer. I went to a place in Atchison, Kansas, a place called St. Benedict's College. This is now Benedictine College. So I was playing on their summer soccer league team, and I broke 3 ribs playing soccer. And this was like a week before I was supposed to go to try out. And that kind of ended my soccer career. And they didn't have a certified, well, nobody had a certified athletic trainer at the time. They had the coach was doing most of the stuff. So he heard that I had been involved with this kind of stuff. So he hired me to be a student manager athletic trainer. And I did it for 4 years in college. And I was going to be a teacher. I was going to be a phys ed teacher. And when I graduated, I started writing all these letters to all the different professional teams. And the Cardinals are one of the teams that answered me. In fact, there was probably, there was 2 teams that answered me. The Cardinals were one and the Kansas City Chiefs were the other one. And since being from St. Louis, that was a lifelong dream of mine. So I took the job with the Cardinals.
Wow, isn't that interesting how life takes, a different turns? Because like you said, you weren't even looking at being an athletic trainer. And then all of a sudden somebody kind of introduces you into that area. You love it. Then all of a sudden you get, hired by your home team, which is, talk about an irony. Wow.
Yeah.
And I remember, I wanted to be a chemist, I think, and a doctor, then I went to University of Illinois pre-law, and then I ended up in baseball, right? Why did I end up in baseball? Saw an ad in Baseball Digest, right? Went to Mickey Owen Baseball School.
Yeah.
Boom, right there, was hooked and went on. So we never know where life's going to take us.
Yeah. And it was a great experience where, I just enjoyed it so much. You could be involved in athletics. You didn't get the accolades that, the players did and that kind of stuff. But I always felt that if they did good and I helped them get on the field, then that was my reward. And, it was a long battle in the minor leagues but it was a great time. We had a lot of fun.
Whether you're in college or the minor leagues, it's not just a battle, right? It's long days. You're there early, leave late. And then, you hear this word all the time, and I know young people don't want to hear it. I like to hear your part of this. In life in general, yes, you can get lucky and get certain jobs, but you got to sacrifice when you're young at times. I know people are saying, well, I don't want to sacrifice. Well, you don't have to, but it does help to sacrifice a little bit because that gets you places.
Right. When I was in college, back then we weren't getting paid much for a student worker. So what I would do, since I was a student manager, I had access to washing all the uniforms and everything. So guys would pay me to do their laundry because I was down there anyway, taking care of the uniforms and anyway. And they say, hey, here's $5. Can you do my laundry for me? I said, yeah, I could do that. And when you're making $15 a week,
$5 is pretty good.
That's a lot of beer money, coming in, especially back then. So you did that. And then when you're in the minor leagues, you really have to put in your time. It wasn't, I come to find out very quickly that it's not a 9-to-5 job. You work till the job is done. And when I started with the Cardinals in Sarasota, I had 2 teams. I had a team that played in the morning and I had a team that played in the evening. Plus, I was the only athletic trainer in the Gulf Coast League at the time. I think there was 3 of us, and I was one of 3. And we were at the White Sox complex in Sarasota. I had 4 teams in the clubhouse there, so I basically took care of 4 teams when I was there. The only kind of break I got was when the 2 Cardinal team played each other.
Yep.
So it was long days. There'd be times where I'd get to the ballpark early in the morning. I get to the ballpark. We had a unair conditioned clubhouse down in Sarasota in the summertime.
Ooh.
So my equipment was a 75-pound bag of ice that was delivered at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was it all day. So by the time the afternoon came, I had just a puddle of water there. So you had to use your brain a little bit and had to think about, how am I going to do this? Because they didn't spend a lot of money in the minor leagues, with equipment, and especially for athletic trainers. But, you have to learn on the fly. And it was really a great experience for me. Now I see the stuff that they have in the minor leagues, and it was better than what I had in the big leagues.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the profession has really evolved in baseball, and it was a hard time, but it was a great learning experience for me. And I had a great mentor, Bob Bowman. I had 3 great mentors, when I was in the minor league baseball. Bob Bowman, who was with the Cardinals for 50 years. He was with the St. Louis Browns and the St. Louis Cardinals. Gus Mock, who was the athletic trainer for the New York Yankees back in their heydays in the 40s and 50s, then went to the Mets in the 60s with Casey, and Al Schuneman, who was with the Cubs for 20 years. So when I was in the minor leagues, I worked with Bowman in the off season at St. Louis University, and it was like going to school every day with, and then Gus Mock, he was living in St. Pete at the time, and I was working extended spring training, and we were at the Mets complex. So the Mets had hired Gus to work in the mornings with the Mets young players. So I got to work with somebody like that, so that was just unbelievable. Listen to those 2 guys. You got guys that worked on guys like Stan Musial and Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Yogi Berra and Whitey Ford and all these great players. And now they're my mentors, so it's really a great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what? And I was thinking as you're talking too about that, during your time, you mentioned, they're long hours, it's tough. Were there times where you just said, man, this is not what I want to do anymore? What kept you going? Because, a lot of times, you're in the minors 4 or 5 years, just like a player, right? After a while, you think, well, where am I going with this? Is it going to be full time? Am I going to make enough money? I got to get married. Maybe I'm getting married. There's a lot of sacrifices there. What kept you going the whole time?
I just really loved the profession. I didn't have expectations of, I set a time limit for myself. Like if I was in the minor leagues 10 years, I was going to go out and get a job because I was married already. And my son, Jim, when we were in Little Rock, Arkansas, he was a baby. So my wife and I would go to the clubhouse in Little Rock. Or Jim would ride on the tractor with the groundskeeper while he was cutting the grass. And Jan and I would be doing the laundry and cleaning the clubhouse in the morning. And then she would take him home, give him a nap and everything. I'd stay at the ballpark, and then she'd come back for the game that night, and that was our life. It was really tough, but I really loved it. And I was really lucky because I advanced pretty quick. I went from rookie ball for 2 years, and I went to AA. I went from rookie ball to AA, and I spent 3 years in AA. And then Bob Kennedy was my boss. He was the farm director for the Cardinals. And in 1976, he was advanced scout for would be the Seattle Mariners. So Bob came into Little Rock, and I said, if anything opens up in this new organization, keep me in mind, because at the time, Gene Gieselman was entrenched with the Cardinals, and Gene was only like 3 years older than I am. So I didn't figure there's no way. Nobody had assistant trainers at the time. So I figured I was going to be stuck in the minor leagues for years. So I said, if anything comes up, keep me in mind. Well, then after the season was over, I was working at St. Louis University, and I was driving to work one day, and I heard that Bob Kennedy was named general manager of the Cubs. So I called him to wish him and tell him congratulations, because Bob and I were pretty good friends. And he said, yeah, I was just getting ready to call you. He said, how'd you like come work for me? And I said, yeah, where do you want me to go? AAA, AA, where do you want? He goes, no, I want you to come to Chicago. And I was 26 years old.
Wow.
Because Gary Nicholson, who was here prior to me being here, he was from Seattle, the Seattle area, and he wanted to be closer to home. So he was hired as the athletic trainer for the Seattle Mariners. So that opened up the big league job. So I just jumped from AA to the big leagues.
Wow. Listen, relationships are important, and I can tell you kept relationships with people. I think that helps. But why do you think you made it so quick?
I think because Bob realized, that I wasn't afraid to work. And because, in spring training, you put in long hours. In the minor leagues, you're a lot of bus rides, as you know, and we spend a lot of time, working, and the players go to the hotel, and the athletic trainer's the equipment man as well. So he goes to the ballpark, and he knew that I wasn't afraid to work. So I think that helped. Plus, my mentor, Bob Bowman, when he spoke, people listened.
Uh,
And Bowman must have told Kennedy, hire him, because Kennedy, Bob would always talk to people, he was a great baseball man, but he knew he was smart enough to know that he didn't know everything. So if he needed help on something, he would go to people, and he would rely on Bowman for the injury stuff, because the guy's was there forever, so he must have said something to Bowman, and that got me the job.
It's interesting, you hear a lot about, people saying, hey, when you're young, get yourself a mentor. It's so important. I think mentors are important. And the other part you mentioned was you're working with these guys when you were younger, and you're actually on the field, in the dugout, everywhere. I mean, you look on hands, you can read all the books you want. I think that's important. You can watch all the videos, but when you're learning from the best one-on-one, there's nothing better than that, is there?
Yeah. Oh, no, there's not. I remember when I was working with Bowman in St. Louis. I mean, at St. Louis University, when you're working with him in the off season, it's like a who's who of sports comes in to see him.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the athletic training room, and Roy Seaver shows up one day. Roy Seaver played for the St. Louis Browns for years. He was a native St. Louis. And Ed McCauley, who was a great NBA and collegiate basketball player, show up. Stan Musial showed up. All these players would show up, and Bowman would introduce me to them, and then they would ask him for help, and he would treat them. He would treat their kids. He would treat their grandkids. So it was a consistent learning day, everyday learning experience. And we would talk back and forth. And one thing I learned from him, which I try to do even to this day, is he would give me like an injury, and he'd say, how would you handle this? And I would give him my synopsis, being a young, crazy 20-something-year-old. And he would look at me and he'd go, I never looked at it that way, but why don't you take that and add this to it, and we'll get to that goal a little bit quicker. So now when I talk to young athletic trainers, I never tell anybody. I mean, I'm sure there were times where he could look at me and say, what are you thinking? But he never did that. He said, that's an interesting way of looking at things. And then he'd add his 2 cents. So that's what I try to do today, is that's an encouragement to people, instead of, I mean, if you really want to destroy a young person, all you have to do is just say, like, what are you talking about? That's going to totally destroy somebody. But he would never do that with me. And that really helped me, and it stuck with me,
Yeah, those are your great teachers. That's why mentors are so important. I really believe that. And
Yeah.
and if you're lucky to have a good one, like you said, and you've had several, that could lead you to success. What would you say is the toughest thing in being an athletic trainer?
Well, I was always accused of straddling the fence. You gotta get the players' confidence. So you can't go running. They tell you stuff, and a lot of times they don't want the management to find out about stuff. So you got to gain their confidence, but yet you got to remember who's paying your salary. So that's the toughest spot, and I was never put in that position to, betray a player. And I think the players could trust in me. And I think that's why to this day, a lot of my former players are still good friends of mine.
Yeah, you almost have to be, you're almost like in some ways, a father figure, a psychologist, psychiatrist.
Oh, you're everything.
Right? I mean,
A marriage counselor, you're everything,
So you better have some psychiatry or background, because the game is so mental. Like you said, the other part, they have to trust you. I mean, if they don't trust you, they're not going to open up to you. And then, you're not going to be able to help them when it comes to an injury or prevention and all that.
Yeah, and that's where you asked me before about, what you want to, why did I want to do this, And then years go by, and then when Bruce Sutters inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame,
Mm,
he thanked me in his Hall of Fame speech
wow.
when when we won in '84. Ron Say had the first bottle of champagne and dumped it over my head and said, "Thanks for everything you did for us this year." I saw Bill Buckner right before he passed away in Arizona, and he came up to me and he apologized because he was really suffering bad from Parkinson's at the time.
Hmm.
And he gave me a big hug and he said, "I never did thank you for everything you did for me." And that's when it all this stuff, all these hours and everything you put in really paid off.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for the medical people there and, the athletic trainers, the doctors, um, what 162 games, you're bound to have issues. But a lot of it, Tony, has to do with how you prepare prior to the season. How does that work from your job standpoint?
Well, the game has changed so much, and now these guys can afford to, condition all year.
Hmm. Hire their own people.
Right. They hire their own strength coaches, they don't have to work. A lot of times when I first started out, these guys were getting jobs in the off season. So they would take their time in spring training to get into shape. And they were such good athletes that it wouldn't take them long. They would never lose that skill that made them a professional baseball player. They just had to take the time to get in shape a little bit. So that's why the game has really changed a lot. So this preparation before the season really helped. That's why they were really strict on putting, even back then, restrictions on pitchers and amounts of innings they played in preseason,
Hmm.
excuse me, that because they were trying to get themselves in shape, and they knew that baseball is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you want to be stronger when it gets to game 158, 59. You don't want to be at your peak when you're at game 4, in April. So that's why the conditioning is such a great part of it. But things
Yeah,
happen during the course of the year. Your body breaks down. Baseball
sure.
is unique that you play every day. And even when you don't have a game scheduled, you're still doing something. You're either taking extra batting practice, you're doing something constantly, or you're on an airplane traveling to the next city. So you're always doing something. So basically from February 1st till October 15th, you're going every single day.
Yeah, it's not like some sports where they get a break for 5, 6 days or a couple days and then
Right.
they're playing again. They get to recover. And I think this is an interesting area. And I know you have a passion for pitching and we're going to talk about the pitching aspect, but the recovery aspect and in the days you were athletic trainer, what were they doing to try to recover faster, whether it be a pitcher or a player, to feel better? Because like you said, the body takes a beating compared to now.
Well, I mean, back then, you just had to do your best. You had to make sure that you got your rest at night, which not always happened. But
Right.
you try to do your best. Sometimes they would not take batting practice. They needed a couple extra hours. They come to the ballpark a little bit later. The manager let them come back later. I mean, when I was there, Jody Davis was our number one catcher. He would start and he'd come to spring training and he would weigh like 235. By the end of the season, he was down to like 170
Wow.
because playing every single day, and we had all
Sure.
day games, and he took a beating. I mean, he had come in, he was black and blue. In fact, one time he kept getting hit with foul tips on his right shoulder. On the left shoulder where his glove was, they had that extra piece,
Hmm.
So him and I, he come in and his right shoulder was just like purple. It was so beat up from foul tips. So he said, we got to figure out something we can do. So him and I devised this little thing that we took a piece of it used to be a catcher's glove. We cut this catcher's glove up and there was a piece of plastic in the back part of the glove that we had Yosh, our equipment man, get it sewn onto his right shoulder. So when he would throw, it would flip up and hinder his throw. And we tried to get this thing patented, because Wilson was our supplier at the time. And they said, it'll never work. It'll never work. And they wouldn't do it. Well, now you look at catcher's equipment today, and what do they have? They got one here, they got one there, it's crazy.
Man, and I know you're close to retirement, but you would have been retired earlier. That patent came through.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and that comes, well, all those catchers used to wear those things hanging down.
Yep.
That came from the athletic trainer of the Dodgers, Bill Bueller, because I think it was Steve Yeager got hit with a foul ball one time.
I remember that.
And he needed something he wanted to play. He had to need something to protect it. So he got a piece of plastic and molded it to protect his, so when he put it wouldn't prevent him from looking down. It was like on a piece of rawhide. So when he would look down, his throat would be protected and it couldn't come up and hit him. Well, now that went, everybody had them for a while. Now they make the mask bigger, and a lot of them wear these entire cages now.
Yeah, like the hockey masks.
That was, necessity.
Yeah,
it was made out of necessity.
Hey Tony, did they take like in those days cold baths, running, biking, what kind of stuff, again, recovery wise, other things like that?
No, they really didn't do that kind of stuff. I think the biggest thing they did for recovery was just rest.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff came on later on, all these new innovations came on later on in my career. I think the biggest thing they did was, they just tried to get as much rest as possible. The pitchers were pretty good because they were on a pretty strict regimen where they had 4 days off in between starts, and the relievers, if you brought in like a Bruce Sutter, he'd come in and with one out in the 7th inning and pitch the 7th, 8th, 9th.
Yep. I remember those days.
Now pitchers in the 5th inning start looking over their shoulder. Where's the bullpen?
Well, that's interesting because I want to get your opinion on this. I know we're not going to settle it here today because it's a big undertaking. We don't have all the answers, but back then it just seemed like you didn't have the injuries we have nowadays. Now I get it. Guys are throwing harder. They're stronger. They're also in better shape too, because like you said, they hire their own personal trainers. They're prepared coming into spring training to actually play games. They're not getting ready in spring training. Right. What's your thoughts about the injuries? Not many injuries in the old days. Now you're seeing a whole lot more.
I think the biggest problem is, well, first of all, they're bigger and they're stronger. Okay. The second biggest problem, especially with young kids coming up, they don't take any time off. They want to go all year round. They want to go to this pitching coach. They want to go to this place. They want to go to this tryout. They want to go to this showcase, and they never take time off. You basically need 4 months off in baseball. Now that doesn't mean sit at home and play video games.
Right.
Do other sports, play soccer, play basketball. I mean, you look at the great athletes in the past. Fergie played basketball. He played hockey in the off season. And when it came to spring training, he just tried to he just honed his baseball skills. Ryan Sandberg was going to play collegiate football, and he went to a tryout and ended up becoming the best second baseman ever to play baseball. All these guys did other sports in the off season, Now it's just like they're one sport. I got to do this every single day because I want to be in the big leagues by this age. And we're starting to find out that a lot of collegiate programs and a lot of professional teams won't sign single sport athletes anymore because they know that is an accident waiting to happen. And you got to try to convince kids you can do things sports related without doing the sport. Like, for example, I was dealing with a kid that was a middle infielder that had a shoulder problem. Well, he insisted on doing something. I said, fine, have somebody hit your ground balls and drop the ball in the bucket. You can still perfect your fielding skills and your footwork and everything in fielding ground balls, but you don't have to throw the ball. Just field the ball, drop it in a bucket. When the bucket's filled, you bring it back to the coach, he'll hit your ground balls. You can do that for hours on end. You're still doing a sports-specific drill without injuring yourself. and you can't convince kids and parents that's what they need to do. Now, I'm a firm believer, we might be getting off the subject a little
No,
bit.
no,
but
no, it's okay. This is good.
I'm a firm believer that the worst thing that ever happened to baseball were showcases.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because a kid's playing baseball, he's a pitcher, okay? Now he gets notification. There's going to be 25 professional scouts. There's going to be 15 Division I collegiate scouts at this showcase. Now, this kid hasn't touched a baseball, in 3 weeks. And he sees a radar gun, and he's going to show those coaches that he can throw 85 miles an hour. You can't do that, and then they break down, and then they may not break down right at that time, but later on, that's going to come back to haunt them. So, that's why I really think I'm not a big fan of showcases,
And I get it from the standpoint, if they were going to do showcases, I think they should be organized in a way, because you have Major League Baseball, you have collegiate baseball, right?
Right.
That's where they want to be showcased by.
Right.
But yet we got Eastern and Northern League players that are going to Florida in the winter, and guess why? Because those people are going to be there. Well, if those people weren't there, the players wouldn't be going during that time. Maybe there's a specific time where these showcases should be held. I mean, what's your opinion?
Make them not so much as soon as the season ends, maybe have a showcase.
Mhm.
Don't do it like in the middle of winter, when some of these guys haven't playing. And when people tell me, well, people go to Puerto Rico and play in the wintertime, or they go to Florida and play in the fall league.
But they stay in shape.
But they're in shape. Plus, they're only there for a couple, like maybe a month at the most.
Yeah.
Like we used to have players going to, I was asked to go to Puerto Rico in the off season one time for, they wanted me to go to Santurce in Puerto Rico. And I couldn't do it because I had to make more money than I was making in the minor leagues. But the players would only be there for especially the prospects, they would only be there maybe 3 weeks, a month at the most. And then they go home and they just say, take it easy for a while, so they don't play all winter until spring training starts.
But there's a big difference also, Tony, between a 24-year-old that's going down, or a 28-year-old and, going in winter league, and a 16-year-old or a 14 and 15-year-old. Those bodies are two different complete bodies.
That's right. That's right. Funny story. And it's scary how people think. One of our physical therapists that I work with called me because I was really into pitching mechanics and
I remember
throwing analysis and all this kind of stuff. He said, I want you to come talk to this kid and father. And I said, why? He said, that's all I'm going to tell you. Come and talk to him. And this kid was 14 years old, had a bad elbow. So I go in and introduce myself. And the first thing out of the father's mouth is, who would you recommend for Tommy John surgery in the area?
I knew that was coming.
I said, well, I know a lot of good physicians that can do that. Does your son have a problem? He said, no, we want to get it taken care of before he does. So that way he can make it to the big leagues quicker.
Unbelievable.
And I just looked at this guy. I said, well, number one, if I knew a doctor would do an unnecessary surgery, I wouldn't recommend him. And number two, do you realize if he did have this problem and he had surgery, you're taking out 18 months of his career? He said, yeah, but you don't understand. He's going to pitch in the big leagues before he's 21. And I said, I don't think that's going to happen. He goes, well, what do you know? And I said, well, I guess I don't know anything. So that's how scary.
I wonder where that player is nowadays. That'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it?
He's probably on a garbage truck someplace, which is not a bad gig, to be truthful, because they make big bucks on those garbage trucks.
Absolutely. But, it's interesting because, the other aspect of this, is it the throwing or is it the pitching all year round is the problem?
It's the throwing. You don't know if you punch a wall constantly, is it that first time you break your hand? Is it the 10th time? Or is it the 250th time? You don't know which one it is. So if you throw all year you don't know if it's like the first month you do it or 3 weeks later, or was it 4 months ago when you start damaging it. So it's the constant throwing. The arm was not made to throw a baseball.
Hmm.
That's why you have to, in the off season, build up a plateau to get those strong. So it'll help prevent some of these minor things becoming major things later on.
So let me ask you, you got young kids, kids start throwing, at 6 years old, throwing rocks, whatever, and then all of a sudden they start to play catch. What are the critical areas when you start working with young kids? Yes, take that time off, 3-4 months, okay, and do something else. I think that's extremely important. But what about as far as a young coach working with kids? What should they be trying to do to prevent? Because the injuries, like you said, have to start when you're young. They don't start when you're 20.
Right. There are I believe there's three basic things that cause major arm problems with young throwers. It's the number of pitches you throw, the pitch types you throw, and mechanics. So if you have poor mechanics, you're going to put excess stress on certain areas of your body, which is going to cause your shoulder to break down. If you do a lot of throwing, it's going to cause fatigue. Then you're going to end up breaking down and causing problems. And the types of pitch you throw, your body may not be ready to throw those type of pitches. I tell young kids, when you're young, fastball changeup. Because if you're 12 years old and you're throwing, say, 70-mile-an-hour fastball, okay, and you come back with a 60-mile-an-hour or 55-mile-an-hour changeup, that's going to work better than any breaking pitch because
Sure.
it looks like a fastball, but it just comes in slower. So if you can perfect and control a changeup at a young age, down the road, you're going to be better off. And then as you get older and stronger, you can put in a curveball and then stay away from all the trick pitches like knuckle curve, knuckleball, split finger fastball, slider. Stay away till you're older. And then when you're 18, then you can start throwing a slider, 17, 18, because you're almost mature enough that you can handle those things. Throw your slider then, 17, 18. Those trick pitches prolong careers. They don't start careers. Anybody you looked at in the big leagues who has a trick pitch, they got that pitch to prolong their career.
Like a knuckleball.
Knuckleball. Bruce Sutter split finger fastball.
Oh, yeah. A great pitch.
Ryan Dempster went to split finger fastball after a while because he could see the writing on the wall that his career was towards the end. It was in the twilight of his career. So he came up with a new pitch and lasted. Dennis Eckersley went from being a starter to end up being one of the greater relievers in baseball, because they could see, now they went to the end of they did something to prolong their career. So you stay away from the trick pitches. So that's why I'm a firm believer. I dealt with this one kid, this doctor called me one time, a friend of mine, Peter Tonino.
I remember Peter. Yeah. You introduced me to him.
Yeah. He's down at Loyola. And I've known Peter since he was a senior resident. He called me. He said, I got this kid, left-handed pitcher. He's 6'3", and he can throw the hell out of the ball. But I've done every test imaginable, and I can't find anything wrong with him. Can you work with him and talk to him? So I said, okay. So I met with him and the father, and I said, okay, tell me a little bit about your career. And he was telling me all about his career. I think he went to St. Charles or Geneva or one of these schools down there. But anyway, he said, I throw typical pitcher, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. I can throw 95-mile-an-hour fastball. I got a great curveball. My slider is awesome. He said, but my great out pitch is a split finger fastball. I said, okay. So this kid's a junior in high school. So I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to follow this routine to figure out, to get you strong. And then I'm going to come watch you throw in 4 weeks. He said, okay. So we followed the routine. So I met him at some place in St. Charles and I said, okay, let me see your fastball. Good fastball, a lot of pop on it. His mechanics were good because I helped straighten out his mechanics a little bit. Good curveball, good slider. Throws a split finger fastball and he grabs his elbow.
Mm.
And I said, that's your problem. He said, but my coach said it's a great out pitch. I said, but it's killing your elbow. Don't throw it. So
Is that for all pitchers that you get, all pitchers should be careful with that pitch, or is it specifically something for him that the split finger was hurting his elbow?
It was hurting him, but I just think that kids should stay away from it.
What about a slider?
18. You talk to a lot of major league pitchers. They say they didn't throw their slider until they were older, like 17, 18 years of age, you know? So, and there was a lot of talk about young kids throwing curveballs. When you're little, you don't have the strength to really snap off a good curveball, you know? So it ends up just spinning a little bit, you know?
And look how tough it is to even throw for a strike when you're older, let alone, you know, a 10, 11-year-old.
Right. And you're not strong enough to really get the break or the snap of your wrist that you have to do that. So, and actually, if you look at the mechanics of throwing a baseball, throwing a fastball puts more strain on an elbow than throwing a curveball.
Why? Why?
Because if you look at it, the motion for a curveball is like this, okay?
So it's coming down.
Coming down.
For our audio people, yeah.
Yeah. So if you just think about it now, when you open a door, how do you open a door? Like this.
Mm-hmm.
When you eat, how do you eat? Like this. Everything is you turn your wrist this way. When you throw a curveball, it's down motion. When you throw a fastball, you're like this.
So it pronates.
And turned out.
Out.
Yeah. Because that's where your mechanics go. When you get on top of a fastball, you come down and you pull it through. It's caused your middle finger to stick up and your index finger to almost be pointing down a little bit. So that's your mechanics of throwing a fastball. So that's putting more strain on your elbow than it is when you try to spin it. And young kids aren't strong enough to do it. I'm not advocating they throw a lot of curveballs, but if you throw, it's just throwing, you know?
And that brings up a good point. So throwing, you know, you mentioned we got to take a little rest, but at the same time, for young kids, is there something they should be doing, whether after they pitch, after they play a game, to get stronger, recover, so that way they have a better chance of reducing an injury in the future?
I'm a firm believer that warm up, when a coach tells kids warm up, the last thing they should do is grab a baseball. That's or coach says, get loose. The last thing you should do is touch a baseball. I use especially around here in Northern Illinois, you're playing baseball in March and April.
Yep.
Which is another sore part of mine.
Yes.
But you're playing baseball in March and April. It's like keeping a rubber band in a freezer. Okay. So you're bundled up coming out there. The coach says, okay, get loose. Well, you pick up a baseball and start throwing. That's like taking that rubber band out of the freezer and pulling it. As soon as you get it out of the freezer, what's going to happen? It's not going to be that elastic and something's going to break. Same way with your muscles and tendons. So what I advise is when the coach says, get loose, run back and forth from left field line to center field about 4 or 5 times. Get some TheraBand and start working on some exercises to get the muscles going, get the blood flowing through the muscles and tendons. Then after you do that 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, then you pick up your baseball.
And then afterwards, you could do the same stuff?
Afterwards,
after you pitch or after play
what?
A game?
It's an individual. I'm not a firm believer in icing down shoulders and stuff. Fergie never iced his shoulder down. What Fergie would do is he would stand in the shower, put his hand on the shower head and get a bottle of alcohol and just milk his arm down to get the blood flowing again. That was then.
You know what?
how many games did he win in the big leagues? 200 and something games?
It's incredible you brought that up because I've done several shows on icing with some top experts who basically defunct the person who invented icing wrote a book with another individual saying that, you know what, I kind of made a mistake. I thought it worked at the time, but now they're finding it doesn't. It's interesting you say that.
Yeah. I mean, if you have an injury,
That's different.
That's different. But there's no reason to ice your shoulder down for no reason, or your elbow, just get a light massage or something. Just, get the blood flowing back, because it's going to build up lactic acid after doing a lot of throwing. So you got to get that lactic acid out of your muscles, and that's going to help your recovery time, and that's what Fergie would do when he would put his hand up on the shower head and just kind of milk his arm down.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you brought that up. And the other part of all this, and I know you have a passion for this, and I get it. I'm going to preface it with, I know why we've got pitch counts, and I know that coaches get excited, and they want to win. So pitch counts, I know in the country had to come in at the high school level, and I know you were involved in part of that process. But it's so important. If you're going to have pitch counts to control things, you got to have them at the younger ages, don't you?
That's when they're most important.
Yeah.
That's when they're most important. I've fought with the Illinois High School Association.
I remember.
Sports medicine committee for years. And the problem was the coaches says, we don't need that. We know what we're doing. Well, if you got a stud pitcher and you're going for the state championship, you're going to use that kid as much as possible because you want to win the state championship. Or if you got a great travel program, you're going to want to use that kid to win as many games as you can, which may help you win it. But down the line, there was a kid that grew up in Schaumburg. He's a year younger than my oldest son. His name was Eric Stocky. He was a great left-handed pitcher for Schaumburg High School. And his freshman year, he was all state. But sometimes he was pitching both ends of a doubleheader.
Wow.
And when he graduated, this kid was a good possible to be a high draft pick or at least a recruit for a Division I school left-handed pitcher. And by the time he was a senior, he was done. And now this is 25 years ago. Now the coach didn't mean to hurt him, but it just happened that he was a stud and, is going to do it. There was another guy that pitched for Schaumburg, TJ, I can't remember his name, pitched for Schaumburg High School. TJ Null. He was drafted by the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. He pitched 2 years in the minor leagues, had Tommy John surgery on his elbow and he even told me when I was doing his rehab, he said, I got ruined in high school because I was doing too much throwing.
By the way, on the Tommy John, you hear a lot of success stories, but they're not all successful, are they?
That's correct. Tommy John, the original, they didn't know that was going to be a success. He missed 2 years of his career because of it, because it was like the unknown. They didn't know what was happening. But going back to the pitch counts, it was so important that I felt that they needed to do pitch counts. And they kept saying, well, no, we know what we're doing. And we can't trust the other coach to do it. Okay. I knew all these questions were coming. My solution was, okay, you have 2 umpires at a game. Okay. So they say Pete Caliendo is pitching today. So he's got a little piece of paper, the base umpire, that is. He's got a little piece of paper, he writes out Caliendo. At the end of it, he's got a clicker. Mm-hmm. You can click and still see what's going on in the game. He looks down at his hand. Okay, in 5 innings, Pete Caliendo threw 95 pitches. Okay, so now he goes to the IHSA website, and because that's how the umpires find out where they're going to be. So he knows, okay, Pete Caliendo, Hoffman Estates High School, writes it down, puts it on there. Pete Caliendo, Hoffman Estates High School, on June 21st, he threw 95 pitches in 5 innings. So now the umpire that's going to work Hoffman Estates next game looks and says, Okay, coach, I saw Pete Caliendo threw 95 pitches 2 days ago. He's ineligible to pitch. Boom. Case solved right there.
Right.
Oh, no, we can't do that. That won't work. It works for everything else, especially in the computer age. Why won't it work for pitchers? They
And
do
it's
it with wrestling,
And it's working now.
and it's working now, but back then it wouldn't work. So, you know, you got to do something if we want to protect our pitches. And I got to admit, they're doing a better job of doing pitch counts, and it can be done, but you just got to convince the coaches.
The other aspect of pitch counts, Tony, also is, I think, and I'm looking at before high school, especially because I think a lot of injuries occur when they're young, as you're saying, is in the big leagues, you don't see many relief pitchers pitch 3 games in a row,
Right.
but
right.
yet we're asking kids in tournaments to do that. Talk about how detrimental that is to an arm.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is, I always tell parents, that's your child. You should tell the coach he's not pitching today. Simple. I mean, that's your child. I mean, in some cases, it's almost child abuse the way they work these poor kids throwing. They go to Cooperstown and they play 5 games in a weekend in Cooperstown, Well, they only have X amount of pitchers, and some of these kids are going to be pitching every day, and you can't do that. That's why it's up to the parents to say, no, little Pete's pitched too much. He's not going to pitch this weekend. Well, the coach might say, well, we don't want him on my team. Well, fine. I'll find a coach that'll, listen to me. So the parents got to be involved. It's their child. And coaches got to be smart about this, Number one, why go to a tournament when you're going to be playing 5 games in a weekend? We're asking 11, 12, 9, 10, 11, 12 kids to do things that grown men don't do.
Exactly.
And we're making them do this. So the parents got to be involved. The coaches got to be a little bit smarter, and it's a simple solution, and why schedule a tournament where you play 5 games in a weekend? Because it might be fun for the parents to go to Cooperstown for 5 days, but baseball becomes a job for little kids. I was working at Palatine High School when I first got out of baseball, and Palatine Travelers were a big travel program.
I remember that.
Still existence. We had kids before their freshman year in high school, 12, 13-year-olds, playing 270 games in the summer. That's crazy. They get to high school, baseball is not fun anymore. Sports are supposed to be fun for kids, and it's getting to be more a job because parents look at it as, well, if little Pete is good, he might get a scholarship to play college, or he might play pro baseball, and then he can make, $20 million a week, or, coach is saying, well, if we win these tournaments, then we're going to get more people into our travel program, and it's going to make our travel program more important. Okay. So that travel coaches want to do it. And the ways, and I don't know if they still do this, but a lot of travel programs say, well, if you come play for our travel program, we're going to have these scouts at the games, and they're going to get your kid big exposure. There's not enough scouts around to go to all these travel programs to do this kind of stuff. But it's a way to bring people in because mom and dad are going to be shelling out big bucks to play travel program. It's going to help that travel program grow,
Yeah, and I think the coaches also need to look at Major League Baseball and watch what those guys are doing. Like you said, they're not pitching 3 days in a row. They've got a top athletic trainers, doctors. They've got recovery programs, rest. I mean, they've got nutritional, and we're asking young kids, like you said, that have that kind of schedule. On the pitching aspect, the other thing I think we forget with young kids is they got to get warmed up now. They got to throw in the bullpen. We forget those pitches, right? And then they're going to go in a game. They're going to do the same thing the next day, even if it's an inning. People say, well, he's only going to pitch an inning. It's not about innings. It's about pitches. And also there's warm-ups prior to that.
And most pitchers in little leagues aren't just pitchers.
Right.
They're catchers, they're center fielders, they're first baseman, they're third baseman. So yeah, he's not pitching a lot, but he's still making 20 throws across the field from third base to first base, or he's making throws from right field to catcher. He's a catcher and he's throwing, back to the pitcher every pitch, plus he's throwing around to second base, first base for pickoffs or whatever. So you got to think about that too. So there's in Little League, most kids aren't specific to a position. They play many positions, which is good, but don't expect them to be a catcher today and pitch 7 innings tomorrow.
And
If you pitch today, go to first base where you don't have to make so many throws.
Good point.
Or be a DH. Everybody's got a DH now. Do that.
Yeah, and what's scary in my mind is you're thinking, like you said, it's an unnatural motion. You got the elbow, all the stuff in the elbow, the shoulder, and now they're adding weighted balls at real young ages. We don't know what's going on in the elbow and the shoulder.
Yeah, and I guess it all gets down to let kids being kids. I'm a lot older than you, but when we were kids, we never did a lot of organized sports. It was just like, we're going to meet at this lot at 2:00 and we're going to play baseball. We had no umpires, we had no parents, and we played for 3 hours at a time, but now everything has to be so organized. You got to play in this travel program. I worked with a guy. He was the athletic director at a very small school here in Elgin, Westminster Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And his son became a pretty good pitcher. He pitched at TCU for a while, and he never let his kid play travel ball. Now, here's a kid that went to a high school. Well, it was K through 12 that only had 400 kids in the entire school. Yet he gets a Division I scholarship by just playing high school baseball. Didn't play travel, didn't do all this stuff. He got noticed. So if you're good enough, they're going to find you.
Good point.
You don't need to be playing all these travel programs and do all these kind of things to get noticed. If you're out there, they're going to find you. Even if you have to go through to an open tryout like Sandberg did, go to an open tryout and get called back a few times, get drafted way down in the major league draft, and look where he's at now. He's in Cooperstown.
You know what? Great point. Because we got about 5 minutes left. I didn't want to, forget this part, because you worked with some great people with the Chicago Cubs. Sandberg, talk about that. He went to a tryout, and that's how he got found out.
Yeah. He was going to University of Oregon. No, University of Washington for a full-time scholarship to play collegiate football, a legitimate freshman starting quarterback. His dad was a baseball fan. Phillies came to town. We're going to have a tryout. So he played a little bit of baseball, not much in high school. Went to the tryout. They asked him to come back. Went to the regional tryout. They asked him to come back. He ended up getting drafted way down, like maybe 80th round or something of the draft. I'm not really sure exactly where, but look where and then he ends up playing for the Phillies. And people don't remember this, but he started out with the Cubs as a third baseman. And he was one bat away from being sent to AAA because he got off to like an 0-29 start in 1982 when the Cubs got him at third base. And I talked to Bob Iback about this. They had a press release. They were going to send him down and bring up another third baseman. Well, the guy they was going to bring up got hurt.
Wow.
So they said, well, let's keep Sandberg around till this guy gets better. Well, Sandberg got hot, and the rest is history.
Wow. And it's interesting when you talk about something like that. That's you just never know, right? Anything can change anytime. Now, you work with some unbelievable, obviously a lot of great players, but when I mentioned you mentioned Sutter, Dawson, Buckner, Sandberg, some of these great players, and there's a lot more. Obviously, I missed some. What made them so special? Why were these guys that good? Because you hung around with them, you saw them on the field, off the field, everything.
They were great all-around athletes. Probably the greatest all-around athlete I ever been around was Rick Russell.
Rick Russell. You would have never guessed Rick Russell.
No, he was a great golfer. He was a great basketball player. If you watch him when he fielded his position, he was like a cat getting off the mound.
I remember.
And he was a great pitcher. I just read an article about some of his statistics that they're trying to get him into the Hall of Fame because he is better. His statistics were so much better than some current Hall of Famers.
But when you look at him,
on bad teams.
But when you look at him, you would never think great athlete.
No, he was a great athlete. I mean, you compare him to Sandberg, it's like night and day. But Rick was a great athlete. Sandberg was a great athlete. all these guys were great athletes, you know?
Mm.
And what people don't realize, if you're on a major league roster and you're the 25th man on a major league roster that might play every other week or maybe get a bat maybe once or twice a week, you were an All-American or a superstar someplace, you know, sometime in your career. That's how good these guys are. You know, one time for, I don't know why, they asked me to take batting practice before it was like 12 o'clock, you know.
Nobody was there. No
So
fans.
yeah, it was, you know, it was just like, there was two guys taking batting practice and Billy Connors was the pitching coach at the time. And he says, well, get in there and see if you can hit. Well, he threw me a curveball. I mean, it was just like, and Billy was like in his late 40s at the time. And he threw me a curveball. It just, I was just in shock at it. But then he kind of just laid a couple up there and I did hit a couple, but you know, that's how good these people are. They're such great athletes and people don't realize it, you know, and they can sit in the stand, which they pay for. They can boo, they can do whatever they want, but they don't realize what great athletes these guys are. And I've seen the best, you know. I mean, I worked 2 Major League All-Star games. In 82 or 81, my All-Star game had 17 Hall of Famers in it.
Wow.
You know, these are the elite athletes, but people don't understand that, you know, and that's why, I guess because I was so close, I have a different perspective of it. And when I hear somebody boo, no matter what sport it is, the athlete, most of the people that boo wouldn't know which end of a bat to hold.
Right.
You know?
And you know what? I was thinking about that. Even if you're in the third row behind home plate, you don't know and don't really understand what it's like to stand at home plate. Big difference when that ball, especially nowadays, 98 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Even 3 rows back, that close. It's not
Yeah.
even close to what you think it is.
Your reaction time to react, if it's coming
It's
at your head,
incredible.
is 1/100th of a second, you know?
And
But
the
that's how
vision
great-
you need, right?
Yeah, that's what great athletes they are, you know. But you know, that, you know, I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of guys that made the major leagues. I mean, I said before, the Cardinals at the time had the greatest minor league system. I mean, I had guys in the minor leagues like Gary Templeton, Mike Proley, Kenny Reitz, Mick Kelleher, Eric Rasmussen, Al Raboski, Bob Forsch, Larry Herndon, Jerry Mumphrey. And it just goes on and on and on, all these guys. And it's just, that's how great this farm system was. And all these guys made it to the big leagues and lasted a long time, you know?
Tony, you're
Keith
when you're talking
Hernandez,
about
Keith Hernandez, Mark
another
Hill,
one,
you
another
know?
one. And when you're talking about great athletes, okay, the Hall of Famers, they're going to fail also, but they're not going to fail as much. So they're dealing with failure in one way, but then you've got other players that great players, but average for Major League Baseball, they're going to fail. How do most of these players deal with the failure? Because I'm sure they came to you at times, even when they were failing, right? Because you had an injury, but yet they talked to you about other things. How did they deal with the failure aspect?
You know what? They just, you know, the greatest person I think who dealt with failure was Bruce Sutter. I mean, here's a guy that would, or Lee Smith, you take these great relievers, you know, it was do or die situations when they come in. Sometimes they did good, sometimes they didn't.
Right.
15 minutes after the game was over, it was gone. It was completely out of their minds what had
Wow.
happened. They don't dwell on it, you know? You just got to have that mental capability to do that, you know? If a guy was in a hitting slump, they go out and work at it and they could figure out what was going on. But if you look at it, the greatest hitter of all times failed 60% of the time he was up there, and that's Ted Williams.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only player that ever met 400. And he still failed 60% of the time, if you think about that, you know?
So you better figure out how to forget it, because if you don't, you're not going to last long in a game.
Right. If you stay with it, that's only going to make things worse. You do things, try to correct your problem. It might not work the first time, but the second time it's going to work, you know?
Yeah.
That's what
Great
it is.
stuff. Tony,
Yeah.
great stuff. Listen, I want to finish it off. Tell the folks about PBATS, I know you're involved big time. You were the founder of PBATS.
Yeah.
And what you're doing now, we'll finish it off with that.
Yeah. PBATS was something that's very dear to my heart. What it was back when I first started in baseball, you couldn't, if you saw a person in management saw you talking to another athletic trainer, you would get fired because they
Wow.
were thinking about, well, you're telling them about Pete Caliendo got an injury, and now we can't trade Pete Caliendo to the Mets or whatever. So what we did was we as professionals wanted to get better in our profession. And the only way we could get better is by more learning. Now, we missed a lot of stuff because of baseball. We couldn't do what other athletic trainers did. So we got together at the baseball winter meetings, kind of like on a spy mission. We kind of gathered in somebody's room at the Opryland Hotel in 1983 to form this educational society. So when they found out about it, we got letters from the commissioner's office, both league presidents, our owners, and our general manager saying, if you do this, you will all be fired. And we basically said, you can fire us, but you're only hurting yourself because we're trying to get better as professionals, which is going to help you as an organization and Major League Baseball. Now you go back 20 years later and Bud Selig has to testify before Congress on PEDs. What's he do? He calls PBATS and says, help me. I need help with this. So we've become much better, not only in baseball, but now within our colleagues. Now PBATS is the most respected organizations in the National Athletic Trainers Society. So it's something that we started, and 38 years later, it's still going strong. It's stronger now than ever. And what PBATS did to us, for us, the founding members, is they gave all of us a ring, and which is really a beautiful ring. And it's their way of saying thank you to us as founders, but also to anybody that has a certain criteria to get it. You have to have so many years in the big leagues and all this kind of stuff, even to get this ring. But a lot of my friends who have World Series rings, they would rather wear their PBATS ring than the World Series ring because that means more to them because there's a finite number of people that got them. Right now, there's only 35 people that got PBATS rings, and how many people got World Series rings?
Right.
The head groundskeeper got a World Series ring,
And you recommend anybody getting into the industry to join the association?
Pardon me?
Anybody is getting into athletic trainer, if you're going to become an athletic trainer, it is a great association to belong to.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the best. I mean, it's one of the most respected organizations in National Athletic Trainer Society. But, it's really a great thing. And we get together every year at the National Trainers Meeting, and it's like 5 years, like we got out of baseball. I've been out of baseball since 1980, out of Major League since 1986. But all these guys were just like, we left yesterday. We're so close. And I come to find out at one meeting, there were six in Texas League at the time in 1975. There were 6 teams. 5 of us made the big leagues within 2 years.
Wow.
And we were all in the Texas League together. And we didn't know it until we start talking about this at a PBATS meeting. So the camaraderie is there. So that is really, that's what's really important. I mean, PBATS is really, it's like watching your child grow, from being to where we were getting fired to now, they're one of the most respected, organizations, but the profession has been very good to me, like I'm in 3 Hall of Fames and I've got, countless, 2 All-Star games. And funny thing that I just found out about a week ago at my college, Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas, just had the 100th anniversary of baseball at the college. Okay. They put a plaque on the field. There are 2 people that made the big leagues from Benedictine College. A guy by the name of Bob Veal, who pitched for the Pirates back in the mid to late 60s, and me.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the only 2 people that in 100 years of baseball at Benedictine College, it was St. Benedict's, they got a plaque there with my name on it that I'm one of the 2 guys that made the big leagues,
That's great.
which is, it's those kind of things now that I'm at the end of my career, those kind of things are fun,
Absolutely. They mean a lot. I mean, it's you've done some great stuff in the game and should be recognized for it. Tony, it's been
Yeah.
great. Listen, happy 50th anniversary. Your special, something special you're doing 50th?
Yeah, we're headed to Alaska a week from today.
All
And,
right.
it's been a long crew. I mean, I couldn't have done this without my wife. I mean, she's been the rock. I mean, all these different moves when we're going to Little Rock and she packs up, stuff and goes to an apartment for 6 months in Little Rock. And then I asked her to move to Chicago where we have no family, no nothing, and we
Wow.
come to a strange city and moved to Schaumburg and, been there ever since, 48 years later, we're still here, so.
That's right. Still going.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
man. This has been awesome. Fantastic stuff. We wish you the best. Have a great 50th. And hopefully I'll see you before I'm moving.
Oh yeah, we'll get together soon. And thanks
Right.
for your help with all your advice too.
No, hey, anytime, you know that. And we've known each other for a while now. So anytime I can help, I love to do it. Thanks for being on the show. Hey, folks, Tony Garofalo, fantastic job. The show, the audio will be up tomorrow on Baseball Outside the Box, also ESPN Honolulu. Tony, again, special thanks. And special thanks to our producer, Brian Kroc, Lineup Media Group. Special thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world. Don't forget, stay safe, be healthy. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next show.